Business is by design. It's not by luck. If you're lucky, that's good. But I'm not a lucky guy. Okay. I'm lucky I was born in America and I've got a good education and I've worked really, really hard and I've been exposed to great leadership, great mentorship, great information. In that respect, I'm lucky. But I'm not lucky in terms of everybody I've ever brought into my business is successful. Frankly, it's the reverse. Most of the people I've brought into my business long ago quit.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with John Solleder. He's been a top earner in 4 network marketing companies in a 42-year career. He holds the distinction of being the first President's Cup recipient for one company, as well as being the Dr. I might mispronounce this, Bonus Award recipient for a second company. So John, there's a ton of interesting and kind of impressive achievements here in your bio, but as I mentioned, I really do like to let the guests tell their story and kind of hear it coming from you. I think it always sounds better that way. So first, let me just say thanks for coming on the show today. Thanks for taking the time out to come chat with me. I'm super excited and I look forward to the conversation.
Well, first of all, Jason, thank you very much for the invitation. Always appreciate talking to another podcaster because I'm a podcaster, and we'll certainly have you on our show as well. We can do all that stuff later on, but yeah, my story is real simple. You know, I was not a guy who gravitated towards business when I was young. I studied journalism in college. I thought I was going to be a sports writer. That was my ambition, was to end up being like Oscar Madison, if you remember on the Odd Couple. It was like I wanted to be a sports writer.
Yeah.
And when I was about to graduate from Seton Hall University in April of 1983, a whole series of events happened very, very quickly as I look back over about a 60-day period. April 18th, 1983, a guy who I wrestled with in high school, he was a couple years older than me, he came into the gym that I was training at, and he told me about a business that I could start for, at that time, $32, which today sounds like nothing, but at that time, $32 to me was real money. And I said, if I can write you a check, Tom, I'll join you in that business. And I did. And not having any idea what I was doing, where it would go, it would turn into a career. I had no idea of any of that. But keep in mind, 1983, we were still recovering from the failed Jimmy Carter presidency economically. Okay, didn't fail in everything, but he certainly economically, total failure. And we were paying 18% interest rates to buy a car, for example, and it was just crazy. There were no jobs. So I said, I'm going to join this business. I'm going to start to promote these products. And the first 30 days, I made $800. Now, let me give you some perspective. In 1983, people didn't use credit cards. 1983, people paid cash or check for everything. People had credit cards, I think, but it was only the rich people had credit cards. Like normal people didn't use them. I'm not sure Visa and MasterCard's history. I should probably look it up because I say this a lot. I might be wrong. Maybe people had them. I just didn't. The people I knew didn't have them. Let's put it that way. The people I knew were 20 years old. We didn't have them. And anyway, so by May 18th, another 18th, 83, I graduated college. And then President Reagan came to speak to the graduates and the parents and, the faculty, et cetera. And President Reagan talked about 2 things, Jason, that got to me then, and they still get to me after all these years. One, he told the fact that capitalism, while not perfect, was the only ism that had freed people. He talked about the fact that the East Germans wanted what the West Germans already had. They wanted, everything from multiple colors of clothing to, there were no cell phones then, but technology, food. They wanted variety in how they spent their hard-earned money. Secondly, they wanted freedom. So he talked about that, and that was obviously a very strong point. But the point that got to me was the fact that he talked about mentorship. That way back 1932, when he graduated college, the economy was very similar to what it was in '83. It was struggling. It was, the country was in a depression. World War One had ended. World War Two was, about to start a few years later. A lot of unrest in the world. And Reagan went back to Illinois, where he'd been a lifeguard the previous summer. And he ran into a successful businessman, and he said, "Hey, can I get a little counseling from you?" And the guy said, "Sure." And he said, "What do you do to be successful in life?" And the successful businessman gave him some terrific advice. He said, "Number one, find a business you're passionate about, something that, you don't have to get up in the morning and look at your watch all day, something that you really want to do. Secondly, find a mentor, find somebody to teach you that business." And President Reagan did that, and got into broadcasting, and went to work eventually for the Chicago Cubs, one of their minor league baseball teams in Iowa, I believe it was, might have been in Illinois. Anyhow, he started to do commercials locally. One thing led to another. Somebody heard him from, I believe it was the Westinghouse Company at the time. They moved him to California, got into acting, et cetera, eventually governor, eventually president. And I felt like that was tremendous advice coming from a very successful guy in President Reagan. So that happened. And then about 30 days later, now keep in mind, I'm still looking for my first quote unquote job. I've got my resume. Now, my resume back then was probably not that much different than young people's resumes today, right? It had my name and my phone number. There was no email, no Twitter, no X, no TikTok, no AOL. None of that existed yet. Nobody, hadn't been invented yet. But anyway, I wasn't finding a job. There were no jobs, frankly. So I said, well, wait a minute. I made $800 my first month, and in today's dollars, let's call that 2,500 in terms of buying power. It's a lot of money. I go out with my friends, and I was the only one with money in my pocket, and I could buy food or at that time, beer and stuff. And anyway, about 30 days later, I was invited to my very first real business meeting. And it was in Hartford, Connecticut. And frankly, I didn't even have a suit and tie. I had no reason to have a suit and tie. So I was like, okay, I went out, I bought a cheap suit and tie. And I went to this meeting up in Hartford, Connecticut with a couple of other people that were in that same business. And the fellow that was doing the meeting talked about a statement. And that statement was this: for things to change, you have to change. And for things to get better, you have to get better. And Jason, to be honest with you, it was like somebody took their hand and like slapped me in the face as hard as they could, because it was like, you got to stop making excuses, John, for why you're not successful or don't think you're going to be successful. You've got everything going for you that you need. You got an education. You're born in America. You're born in a capitalist society. Okay, you're not born in a third world country that you got to overcome all those things just to have those opportunities. Like, you've been blessed and you don't realize it. Take advantage of that. But more than that, stop blaming your parents, the government, your sisters, your next door neighbor, your girlfriend. Start taking responsibility for your financial future. And that's what I did. And that was in June of 1983, a long time ago. And I worked my tail off. I was not an overnight success story. 1989, I made my first $1 million in network marketing, accumulated, by the way, from the time that I started. So it sounds like a lot more than it is. And it was significant at that time because I hadn't reached my 30th birthday yet. But more important than that was the fact that I learned the life skills and the business skills, and also how to think. One of the things that I recognized was I had to work on my self-development. Okay, like that fellow, that quote, for things to change, you have to change. That came from the late, great Jim Rohn, who I had no idea who Jim Rohn was, okay? But I found out who he was. I found out who Zig Ziglar was. I found out who Bob Proctor was. I found out who some of these other, Earl Nightingale, and you go down the list of all of these great orators of information and self-development. I started to read voraciously. Okay, and I still, to this day, I still read 10 to 12 books a month. But I started to read things like As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, and on and on and on. Obviously, Think and Grow Rich, everybody's read that. But the predecessor to that book, by the way, okay, was by a guy named Waddles, okay, on, how to make money. Okay, so like I started to accumulate all this. I lived in the library. When I had free time, I wasn't chasing girls or going to the bar. Okay, if I wasn't at the gym or working, I was at the public library getting as much self-development stuff as I could possibly read. Okay, and borrow those books out. In some cases, I bought them. In some cases, you borrow them out of the library. But that's kind of where I started. And it was a mind thing. It was in my mind, I started to say, okay, for things to change, I had to change. Okay. And I had to acquire those skills. And here I am, 42 years later. I've had a lot of success in my life, fortunately, but I feel like I'm just beginning, because we're living in interesting times.
Yeah. It the I mean that you were young when that happened. I think it's well, from a I guess from a podcast perspective, it seemed, a lot of people have mentioned that moment, that aha moment, I guess, if you will, where, you hear that quote or something happens that you're like, you know what, I need to make a change to get where I want to be. And I mean, I think you were fortunate that that happened at such a young age. It's not, some people it's 40s, 50s, and suddenly they're like, huh, what have I, what have I been up to these last few years? And so, I mean, it's really great to have had that influence at a young age. And you said, kind of those two things, but you mentioned mentorship. Did you have, kind of a lot of mentors along the way that helped guide you? How did you, I guess, short of this business meeting where you hear, inspiring quotes, I think sometimes it's people hear those things, but then you go back to your regular day, but it sort of seems like you stuck with it, held on to that. Did you have guidance outside of those moments?
I had a little bit. The guy who said for things to change, I started to follow him. And his name's Larry Thompson. Still alive, still lives here in Texas, not too far from me. We're still good friends. The other guy that I started to follow a lot, okay, was Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. I started to read everything I could get my hands on because I felt like first of all, he was coming from a position of faith. And secondly, though, he would give great comparisons. And I'll just give you listeners one. He said, if you think you have problems, go to a funeral home or nursing home. And it was like, whoa, I didn't sell anything today. Oh, poor me. All of a sudden you go and you see somebody burying their spouse or their best friend, or a nursing home where a person's being, put in, near the end of their life. And, you know, you see those things and all of a sudden it gives you perspective, So it was kind of
Yeah.
just once again giving myself those reminders. And then I met another guy. I was probably 23, 24. I met Tom Hopkins. And I think Tom's still around. And Tom was a real estate guy in Phoenix, super successful, and he started to do a lot of public sales trainings. And I met Tom, and believe it or not, you wouldn't know it from our podcast, but I was a really shy person. I'd go to a party, I'd be the guy in the corner. You know what I mean? Like I would talk to the people I knew, but if I didn't know you, like if we met at a party, we'd shake hands. I'd say, "Hey, nice to meet you," but that was the end of it. Unless you pursued the conversation, I was not somebody who
Yeah.
was going to go, "Hey, so Jason, who are you?" That wasn't me then. And I met Hopkins, and it's funny. I'm 6'3", and Tom's a smaller, much smaller guy. I don't know how tall he is, but I don't want to say how tall I think he is. He might get mad at me, but he's much shorter than I am. And we're at this seminar, and he's coming out of the bathroom, and I'm going down the hall to get to his seminar. Here he comes, and it's like I could tell he was in a rush, to get to the stage. But I was like, "Mr. Hopkins, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir," and shook his hand, and he said, "How can I help you? What's your biggest obstacle?" And I said, fear of talking to people. He took out his business card and he wrote on the back, "Do what you fear most." And I'll tell you, Jason, I kept that card in my wallet. I eventually lost it, but I probably had that in my wallet for 20 years because
Mhm.
my thing was I was just worried, hey, rejection. I didn't like rejection. I didn't like people telling me no. Nobody does, right? But I realized you got to work with numbers when you're in any kind of sales or marketing. Not everybody, not even your best friend, is going to necessarily buy what you're selling, for whatever
Yeah.
reason. So, once I got to that point where I didn't take it personal and I realized it was just a fear of mine, I was able to overcome that.
It it's funny that you say, believe it or not, having a podcast, you're shy. I believe you because I'm the same. And I actually did a lot of the reason I started my podcast was to essentially just force myself out of my comfort zone and be uh, try to do exactly what you had, what he wrote on that card is do what you fear, which is like having to make conversation with people. Oh, by the way, it's on a camera, and people are going to potentially watch this out in the world. So yeah, I think it seems like you've just had some really great, I don't know, right place, right time, some great opportunities to be inspired. And I think one of the big things about that people maybe miss out on is just the openness, like the willingness to take those moments in and actually have them impact you, and not push back as if, oh, that was just that was a meaningless interaction or whatever, that he was just being nice. I think that there's something to be said for that ability to be open to the opportunities.
And you're absolutely right. And that was the thing, was that I started to listen to people about their life experiences and say, okay, how can I apply what happened to them? Okay, how can I learn from somebody else's mistakes, somebody
Yeah.
else's successes? And a lot of times, we learn more by failure than we do by success.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I go out and I talk to 10 people, and one of my books, Moving Up, I talk about the 10 penny principle, which applies to any kind of sales, frankly. Put 10 pennies in your left pocket every time you talk to somebody, move one to your right pocket, for example. And when I got to that point where I realized that, everything was just basically a numbers game. Now, how has that changed and morphed now in 2025 and going beyond? We got the ability to be in contact with a lot more people than I had in the 80s in all the different business ventures that I had engaged in, from the respect that today with technology, 10 people a day is not enough. You
Mm-hmm.
got everything from, clip farming you can do to reach people. You've got social media galore. You've got, all of your TikToks and Instagrams and video, you got all these ways to meet and engage with other human beings that we didn't have in the 80s. I mean, we're living to me, we're living at the best time. Now, 40 years from now, somebody might see our podcast and say, well, wow, they didn't know about the fact that you could talk into your finger and reach people, because, who knows what they're going to invent next, right? The way
Right.
technology's going. But, how it's all changed is very, very exciting. I mean, when I started that first business, my phone plugged into the wall. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
Today, one of the bits of advice that I give, because I do a lot of advisory stuff for different types of businesses, mostly in direct sales, but some in traditional business too, is I think there's two really important words that we need to adapt. One is pivot, and two is to be agile. And what do I mean by that? Kind of fast forward through all the years of doing what I've done. We had this little situation, right, in 2020, right, with COVID. 2020, 2021. I mean, we kind of lost a couple of years there, right? I mean, we're just kind of like a blur. And so 2020, the end of 2019, okay, I've got my book coming out. Okay, this is the third book in this series, right? So Moving Up 2020, great title, 2020, 2020 vision, 2020, like all the 2020 analogies you want to make. And I got this other book I've been working on separately, right, called Leave Nothing to Chance. This one comes out like January of 2020. The other one comes out at Christmas time. You got two books launched, a lot of money invested, by the way, not to mention years of your life, not to mention ghostwriters, partner, I mean, it's a process, to write a book. Anyway, so all of a sudden I'm supposed to be in 60 cities for my network marketing business in Latin America, Europe, and North America. I got this big tour planned, right? Where, okay, I'm talking about my business, obviously. And oh, by the way, I got a new book out, bring 100 books with you, sign it for the first 100 people want them, and then the rest get them up from Amazon. Well, that didn't happen, obviously. So the first keyword, pivot, right? Think about it in basketball for a second, right? Basketball playoffs going on right now. I know you're a basketball fan. You're a Celtics fan. I'm a Mavericks fan, so I don't have much to root for. So, but I'll root for the Celtics. I like the Celtics. But anyway, all that said, right? You think of pivoting in basketball. You got your back to the basket, right? Your teammate throws you the ball. You pivot on your foot to turn around to face the basket and throw the ball in, hopefully. That's the same thing in business. If I had said, okay, I have no way to market these books, dead in the water, don't worry about it. Just, kiss off the investment, kiss off the years, and more importantly, kiss off the people that the books can impact.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I did a pivot. The pivot was what? Pivot was I created a podcast. Pivot was I discovered Zoom, right? Greatest invention, by the way, Zoom and Riverside, like all these things where, you can sit in your house, I can sit in my house, and we're talking like we're in each other's living room. And it's terrific.
Yeah.
But to that point, from a teaching standpoint for everybody, that pivot point was where I had to pivot to do something else. In my business, I pivoted. I created a thing called the Zoom-tacular. Right? I took Zoom and spectacular, put the words together, and made the Zoom-tacular. And why did I do that? Because I knew everybody was going nuts being home, right? They're getting stir crazy. In Canada, you couldn't leave your front lawn, for example. If you did, they could literally arrest you. I mean, that's how crazy things got up north of the border. And I have a lot of business in Canada, and even here in the U.S., there were places that it was locked down. And anyway, so I created this idea of Zoom-taculars. So every Saturday afternoon, we had a meeting online for about 3 hours. But I said, I just don't want to get on there and talk about, glutathione and nutrition and, all this heavy duty stuff. These people are getting beat up every single day with the media, with friends dying and being sick and everything else, right? We got to have to make this fun. I actually brought in a disc jockey who was sitting at home with his equipment, and we would start the show with music. And then at the end, I would tell everybody, hey, grab your wife, grab your husband, okay, grab your significant other, and we're going to have music for about a half hour, 45 minutes, and I'll even have the guy take requests if you put him in the Zoom note thing, okay? If he's got it in his computer, he can play it for you. And I come back one day. This is really funny. I come back, right? I leave the screen on. I went in the other room. I come back about 10 minutes later, and I'm seeing all these people dancing. Okay, so the point is, I pivoted. I kept people involved and engaged at a time where it was very easy to lose people, lose their attention on the business, right? So that's a pivot in my life, in my career, and if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, how do I pivot in my current business? Maybe there's something that's not working. How do I make a pivot? The agility comes in a little bit different. The agility is kind of like, think of it once again in sports terms, going forward, going back, going sideways, right? You got to be able to be agile. Now I'll be 64 here in a couple of weeks. Okay. So I'm not a young guy. So how did I had to be agile? About a year ago, I was hearing like everybody else about AI. And, my son is fortunately, my son's a full stack coder and he's studying to be an electrical engineer, super smart with the internet. I said to him one day, I said, what should I know about AI? He said, oh, Dad, just don't worry about it. And I said, no, I need to worry about it because everybody else is talking about it. And I don't understand a darn thing about it. And I started to study AI. Then I get an email from a guy one day in Las Vegas for my podcast. And he says all these really, terrific things of you could, I'd like to be on your show, boom, 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 boom. I love this particular show that I listen to, blah, 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 blow smoke up my skirt. And I contact him back and he says, hey, by the way, what do you think of my email? I said, oh, man, I was flat. You get your chest out, like you're feeling really good. He says, yeah, my AI assistant wrote it. It was the best written email I've ever gotten in my life from anything. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. So all of a sudden now I've jumped into the AI thing completely. Okay. And it's a study. And because it's so aggressive as a technology, aggressive in a good sense and a bad sense. There's a negative. AI certainly replaced a lot of jobs. But go back to the agility and go back to the pivot. If you're listening to Jason's show and you're in a job that might be replaced by AI, and there's a lot of them, by the way. Okay, supposedly now Uber is using electronic cars or cars rather that are driven by AI. There's a restaurant here in Dallas I eat at occasionally. A robot waits on you the whole time. The only interaction you have with a live person is at the end when you're paying your bill on the way out. It's a live person. So there's no question this is happening. Supposedly, I think McDonald's or one of the other fast food joints over in Fort Worth is all manned now by robots. Okay, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So once again, if you're in that position, How do you pivot and how do you become agile within whatever you're selling, whether you're in direct sales, whether you're in financial services, whether you're in real estate, whether you're in a traditional job that might be replaced by it. Here's my advice: embrace it and say, how do I be agile with it? How do I apply it in my business? Because this element of my business might get replaced 100% by it. So let me create that element that only I can do. For example, if there's only, if I'm dealing with one of my customers, and I deal, for example, with a lot of doctors in my business, only I can deal with them. I can't have a robot deal with them. I can't have AI deal with them. They expect me to answer their questions and find answers for them that they have on particular things, right? So what you can do best, you do best in your business. The other stuff you let AI do for you. A lot of writing. Okay, I do a lot of writing, and I do a lot of writing now using an AI feature that I bought. Okay, for example, why? Because he can do research at the speed of light. So why not use it to the best of my advantage? Now, once again, when I think 42 years ago, starting my little business in Westwood, New Jersey, for $32, that 42 years later, we'd be talking about robots that I'm using in my business. I couldn't see that. That was like Star Trek. At that time, Star Trek existed. Captain Kirk was alive. He's still going strong. He's 90 something years old. But to that point, those are things in any type of business that we're in that we have to think about pivoting and being agile and how to apply what today's technologies are to our current circumstance. And to me, that's part going back to the whole, personal development, self-development thing that I started our conversation with. It's one and the same. I mean, it's part of what we have to do. We cannot ignore the obvious. The obvious is technology is here to stay. Bill Gates made a statement about 20 years ago in reference to the .coms, right? That he said, there's going to be two types of businesses down the road. One has got an internet presence and is in business, and the other that's out of business. Well, he was right. And I got to say that now with AI, you're going to have an AI presence that you utilize it and make it your friend and use it to the best of your ability within whatever it is that you're doing for a living. And at the same time, don't lose that personal touch where that person says, hey, you know what, Jason, only you can answer this for me about your business. You know what I mean? Like I don't want a robot response. I want a Jason response. So know where we fit with personality versus where we can use the technology. Let the technology do the heavy lifting. You do what only you can do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, I love what you said about, pivot and agile. I think those are important words. I've used them and I guess my spin on that has been adaptability, but I think that that's like a huge, I guess, attribute of someone who can be successful in business in general is just being it because things are going to change. You just talked about AI and you've got to be able to accept, adapt, bring in new technologies and kind of use them to your advantage. Of course, not losing that personal touch that you bring to the table. John, one thing you said it a couple times, and I want to maybe just clarify for people listening what you mean by that. But you said everything's a numbers game,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I know what you mean. But I wanted to maybe have you expand on that just for maybe I'm wrong, but so myself and listeners know where you're going with that.
Well, what I mean by that is probably everybody listening to your show, one way, shape, or form, is in sales, marketing. Maybe they own their own business, maybe they work in somebody else's business, but you've got to produce numbers. At the end of the day, generally in business, we're all evaluated on numbers. What numbers do we produce? Like if you're in commissionable sales, like I've been for 42 years, you eat what you kill. Like if I don't do numbers, I get paid my direct selling business, for example, which is one of several businesses that we have. It's my main business. I only get paid on what I sell on a monthly basis, what I sell, what my team sells. Okay. If the owner likes me, he doesn't send me an extra 10 grand. If he doesn't like me, he doesn't deduct an extra 10 grand. In other words, it's a static number. So that's one part of numbers. The other part of numbers is if you watch Shark Tank or any of these business shows, the really successful entrepreneurs in the world, they'll always say you got to know your numbers. You watch somebody that comes out on that red carpet in front of Kevin O'Leary and Mark Cuban and the other guys on there and gals on there, and if they know their numbers, they got a shot at getting an investment. If
Yeah.
they say, hey, I took this glass to the marketplace and it cost me $1.12 to make it, and I'm selling it to Walmart for $4, and I'm making whatever that is, whatever the spread is. But if I made them, if I increase the volume with your investment, I can get it down from $1.12 to 50 cents, but I'm still going to sell it to Walmart for $4,
Yeah.
for example. Okay, they're probably going to get a shot. They got a shot at one of those 5 people writing them a check and saying, I'm going to business. If they come out and go, well, I don't really know what it costs. I don't know what it costs to sell it. Okay, when I get out there on, Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and everything else, all the social medias and all the other platforms, I don't know what my cost of customer acquisition is. They got no chance.
Yeah.
Well, those 5 individuals are no different than you or I. When we look at our business, we say, hey, we need to know our numbers. Okay. Now, the numbers are what we sell and what it costs us to sell. But the other number that's really important if you're in direct selling, and to me, direct selling is anything in network marketing, insurance, real estate, automobile sales, etc. All direct selling, and there's other examples, but those are large ones, large industries. If you look at any of those things, okay, how many people do I need to talk to or communicate with on a daily basis to get a sale? This comes down to what's called gauges and ratios, right? Gauges and ratios are if it's 10 people, like I was taught way back, talk to 10 people a day. Okay, talk to 10. Why? Because out of 10, 7 are going to blow you off and say, I got no interest in what you're selling. Fine, so we eliminate those people. 3 say, hey, I got an interest. That sounds like an interesting product or service that you're marketing. Hey, I got an interest in maybe buying that. Okay, great. Those are prospects that we have to deal with right this second, right? We got to transact with them, get their money, get them their product or their service, right? So, in that case, it's 10 to 3, but out of those 3, one's credit card declines. One's wife or husband says, you can't spend that money this month. We got to pay the IRS or we got to pay whatever. Mm-hmm. And 1 out of the 10 buys. Well, if that's your consistent numbers, then every single day that you've got to interact with 10 new people to get 1 sale. Now, let's say that sale generates you $500 profit, let's say. Okay. Well, if hey, if I do 10 a day, 1 says yes, 1 I transact with, okay, over the course of the week, if I do that 5 times, I make $2,500, or over the course of a month, I make 10 grand. Mm-hmm. I'm making a living in whatever it is that I'm marketing. Okay. That's what I mean by the numbers. And those numbers are really important. And once again, that's not something you can get from AI. That's only something you can get from doing it yourself, saying, what do I got to do? Okay. Now, today, maybe that's changed in the respect of how I get to those 10 prospects for my product or service, right? Because today I can use technology and I can talk to strangers and I can use all sorts of different ways to get there. But either way, I still need to talk to, 10 people to get a sale. Yeah. And maybe, hey, what if it's a lucky day and I get 3 sales today and I make $1,500 today? Do I take off tomorrow? No, I come back tomorrow and I do it again, because tomorrow I might go 0 for 10 or 0 for 15 or 0 for 20, right? Mm-hmm. But it's that discipline of knowing what you have to do in your business to become successful. And I've coached people that have made ridiculous money in a number of different companies, not just before that I've been in, but I've have outside people that I work with that in some cases are the top earner in their company or one of the top earners in a respective company. And they all understand what I'm talking about, but their downlines don't. Their downlines think they're going to get lucky and they're going to trip across somebody who, they're going to trip some guy at the airport, and the guy's going to say, hey, I need to join your business and go out and make him a ton of money. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Business is by design. It's not by luck. If you're lucky, that's good, but I'm not a lucky guy. Okay. I'm lucky I was born in America and I've got a good education and I've worked really, really hard and I've been exposed to great leadership, great mentorship, great information. In that respect, I'm lucky. But I'm not lucky in terms of everybody I've ever brought into my business is successful. Frankly, it's the reverse. Most of the people I brought into my business long ago quit. What do you do when they quit on you? That's a whole nother thing. What if they quit on you and they're a friend that you say, well, I really wanted, well, Jason and I, if we locked arms, I know we'd have a ball together. We'd make a lot of money. But Jason says, John, this is not my thing. Yeah, but I really want to work with you, buddy. But you go, hey, it's not my thing.
Yeah.
What do you do then? Okay, well, you know what? You dust yourself off and you go to the next person.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, that is, I think what I thought you were getting at. And I guess I would say the the piece about, you got to talk to 10 prospects a day. It's and then also the part about knowing the numbers of your business. I mean, really they play together because as you mentioned, you need to know, I mean, it's easy to throw out that number. I have to talk to 10 people a day. But in your particular business, whatever it is, you may have to talk to 50 people a day to get, three to listen and one to buy or whatever. I think it's just, and so along with knowing the financial health of your business, you have to know the metrics that allow you to get more business. And I think that's where those, two
Absolutely.
things tie together very, very well. So I thanks for kind of breaking that down. And like I said, that's where I thought you were going, but I want people to understand that I love what you said, that the business is by design. It doesn't happen accidentally. Like maybe once you're well established, those ratios might get a little bit lower, and you might have people coming to you and things like that. But I mean, ultimately, you still have to know what that is, and if you want growth, you'll have to find new ways to bring in new business. So I think it's a really great example.
And if you're doing a business for a long time, okay, does it get easier? Yeah, it does. Because to your point, you do get referrals. You do
Right.
get somebody calling you up and saying, "Hey, I'm a friend of Jason's, and he gave me your number, and I'm interested in your product or your service." That does happen, but even that, you can't rely on that. That's free business. I mean, that's the greatest business in the world is a referral,
Right.
right?
Right.
And always ask for, and whatever you're marketing, always ask for referrals. And hey, I need help. And 42 years in, I'm still looking for distributors. I'm still looking for help in my businesses constantly. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like I'm not done yet, and that's most people, by the way. I worked in the insurance industry for a short time way back. I'm still licensed in the insurance business, and I do that for two reasons. Number one, I got a lot of people that come to me for financial advice. I finally said I might as well go keep my licenses active. But the other reason is the estate plan changes, based on Congress, who's in, who's out. I mean, that constantly changes. So I will stay on that. But here's a point I want to make on that. Because if we're in sales, we normally are in sales management also. We might be, we might be a realtor, and we've got the office here in Richardson, Texas. But I probably got 4 or 5 guys working in my office with me that I'm going to manage, motivate, etc. I learned a really great lesson, Jason, once again early on in my life, and I was lucky that a lot of these lessons, to your point earlier, came early on. Um, or I'm just getting old and I remember them and I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. But it could be either. But in all seriousness, I worked for MetLife for a few years in the '80s, and I was at a meeting in New York City, and a guy named Bob Crimmins was like their regional sales manager, and the top sales rep at the time in MetLife was a Persian gentleman. People laugh when I say his name, and it's really his name, Mehdi Fakazadi. Sounds like I'm swearing, but I'm not. That was his last name. Legend in the insurance business. Ironically, his son became my mother's orthopedic surgeon, believe it or not,
Oh,
over
well.
time. Anyway, but anyway, long story short, Bob Crimmins gets up on stage. There's about 1,000 sales reps in the room. And he says, I'm a pretty busy guy, and a lot of times I get phone calls from some of you. He says, and I'm on the phone with you, but I'm reading reports and I'm multitasking. He said, but when Mehdi Fakazadi calls, I put down everything and I listen. Now, why did he listen to that guy and he didn't listen to the other 15 reps that called him? That he was multitasking, and he was listening. I'm sure he was listening to those people too, but he was doing two things at once. Well, his point was well taken. When a guy is busy as your number one sales representative at the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company calls, and you're you're not his boss, but you're his upline, if you will, you're his support. One of two things: either he's got a problem that needs to be solved, or he's got an opportunity. And boy, oh boy, I tell you, when Mr. Crimmins said that way back, it just stayed with me all these years. When one of my top guys calls me, they don't call me every day. They may not call me for 3 months. But if they call me out of the blue, I know they've either got some tremendous opportunity, okay, or they got some big challenge. My job is to help them resolve it or think through it or see if, is there somebody else in the food chain that we need to involve in the process, right? That was a great sales management lesson for me. And I've applied that over the years. I haven't applied it perfectly. Some people might hear this and go, yeah, we didn't apply it here or there. But for the most part, I learned to listen to my top people. Some people, if they call you every day, they're not your top people. Your top people only call you when there's an opportunity or a problem, was Bob's point. And that's what I've maintained through the years is when somebody calls me that's a top person, I'm going to put down everything else. I'm not going to be checking my Facebook account or my Instagram or my TikTok or, who won the hockey game last night. Like I'm going to listen to what that person has to say because solving their problem might result not only in them being happy, but me being happy. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me give you one other one, Jason, if I can, on AI though. How this all transpired, right? So this guy contacts me by email. I have him on my show, like you have me on your show today. We get, as we know with podcasting, right? You turn the camera off. Sometimes you learn more about somebody than you do when the camera's on, right? So we get talking afterwards, and he says, "I want to introduce you to somebody." So this guy's name is Chris. He introduces me to a lady named Diana out in Malibu. She's in medical PR, right? She deals with nothing but doctors, high end. And anyway, she says to me, "I want to introduce you to the guy who owns a publication called Top Doctor Magazine."
Mm-hmm.
Well, my business is in healthcare, okay, with a natural supplement with a lot of research. So I'm like, wow, Top Doctor. I've seen that magazine in my chiropractor's office, my MD's office, etc. through the years. Some of your listeners probably are familiar with it. And I said, yeah, sure. Give me his number. So she gives me this guy's name and numbers. His name is John Hyland. It was over in Virginia. So I call him up. I'm like, "Hi, John. My name's John also." Chew the fat a little bit. Turns out he had a wrestling background. I had a wrestling background. So, we talk sports a little bit and all of that. And then he goes, "How can I help you?" I said, "Well, Diana wanted me to call you about Top Doctor Magazine because I think our company and our product might be a fit for you." He's like, "Well, great." I sent him information, sent him some samples, etc. Well, long story short, as we speak, my company's on the cover of that magazine. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Now, without AI, remember, this is a guy a year ago. AI was like, one of those, kids. I don't want to hear about AI. Now it's like AI, because of a contact that contacted me via AI, introduces me to a lady who introduces me to a guy. Now some other good result happened as a result. We had over 100,000 independent hits to their website last week on that magazine cover. So once again, if you're a little older, you got some gray hair, and I got plenty of it. Don't be closed to this, okay? Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it, like I said earlier, okay? Doesn't mean you need to be an expert. I am no expert in AI, not even close. I'm sure, Jason, you're younger than I am by far. You probably know 10 times more than I do. But don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. Yeah, don't be afraid of it. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
is the point.
It's absolutely.
And there's multiple opportunities in your business that if you just are open to it, may manifest, maybe not today, maybe not next year, maybe not 2 years from now, but at some point they're going to manifest themselves where you're going to go, yeah, because of AI, I met this significant person or persons, and it was a game changer for my business in a positive way.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I think I don't. I definitely would not say I'm a expert, but we use it. I mean, we use it every day. It's something that I see as a go-to tool as part of business development, and it just, I mean, it honestly saves time, simplifies things. You mentioned, the speed at which you can research something, and it's not perfect yet, but it's very a very valuable tool. So we definitely use it. So, but John, let me make sure I get to ask you the questions I like to ask every guest. The first one, of course, is name of the show is Know Your Why. So I always want to ask people, what is your why? What's you've had tons of success. You've shared a lot with us here today, but what keeps you motivated and excited about the future?
Great question. First of all, it's real simple. And it's that I think the best of times are ahead of us, not just financially, but I think in terms of the evolution of all of these technologies that we're talking about, podcasting, AI, and what's to come, that it's ahead of us. I have friends that I see on Facebook every day. Another friend retires to Florida. I grew up in New Jersey, right? So everybody retires to Florida from New Jersey if they're so fortunate to do so. And I'm like, why are you guys retiring? We're living at the most exciting time in human history. If we can stop killing each other, if we can get these wars to end and get people to stop killing each other in the Ukraine and Russia and the Middle East, and we get people back to focused on the best angels that are in all of us, we got a remarkable future for not only for America, but for the world at large. And these technologies are certainly a part of that. I look at what goes on. I deal with people in Bangladesh and the Philippines and different emerging markets in business, and it's just fascinating to see how they're using some of these technologies. Mostly that were developed here in the United States to advance their businesses, their countries, etc. So I just think we're living in a great time. So I get up every single morning early. I'm an early riser. One of the keys to success is go to bed early, get up early. If I'm back from the gym and the sun's up, I'm late. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I'm an early riser. I love to work. I love people, but also, from a fundamental standpoint, I am a person of faith, and I do believe that the good Lord blessed me. My life could have been much different. I stopped drinking alcohol when I was 20 years old on my 20th birthday, and I come from a family that had some problems with addiction, and I was blessed to go the other way. So I feel like when much is given, much is expected. So I feel like I'm giving back constantly, be it through podcasts, be it through business, be it through mentoring young people. Like the wedding I'm going to Saturday, I'm mentoring this kid since he's 14. He's doing some great things in his life, and so we're here to give back. We're not here forever, but we're here to give back.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. When people hear this and they want to connect, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Probably one of two ways, two ways, and then our podcast, of course, as well. But johnsolleder.com, SOLLEDER.com. You can get our books on Amazon under that name as well. Or if you want to text me, I don't really take live phone calls anymore unless I know who's calling, because your phone number gets out there through a million different ways, which is why I give it, by the way. Some people are like, I'm amazed you give your phone number. I'm like, I'm going to give you my phone number. If you want to send me a text, send me a text to John. I heard your show with Jason. I got a question. I got a problem. Or maybe I'm interested in a side gig. Maybe you're interested in what I do. Maybe you're interested in our industry. Maybe our thing's not for you. I got friends in every top network marketing company, and they'd love to talk to you if you're not interested in what I got. So my telephone's 972 area code 259-0875. And just send me a text, though. Just say, hey, I heard Jason's show. I might even give you a free gift. I might send you a book, or I might send you some product. I don't know. Just contact me if you want, and let's talk. And then our podcast, by the way, too, you can get under our name, mostly on YouTube. We're on Rumble a little bit and all that, but we like YouTube. YouTube's pretty easy to use, so we like that. Check out our show. And Jason, I want you to be a guest on it. But we focus on business, but we focus on health sometimes, and sometimes we just focus on people with interesting stories. I just interviewed a guy that is called the Peace Troubadour. Really interesting guy. He's an Episcopalian priest, Franciscan, and I knew very little about the Franciscan order. I'm embarrassed about that. I didn't know much about St. Francis. I do now. I've been doing a lot of reading about him. But anyway, this gentleman, he wrote a book on his journey from New Hampshire to Oregon during the election. And he sings, he's a singer, and he goes to war-torn countries and he actually entertains, and he's done this for many, many years. And, so sometimes I hear a story like that, probably like you do, Jason. I go, hey, he's not a business guy, but he's a guy with a great message. I want people to
Right.
hear his message. So you'll go down there and you'll go, well, this isn't all business. No, it's a mixed bag, but if somebody's interesting, got a story to tell, you certainly want to have them tell it,
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, yeah, maybe there's a theme to the podcast, but I think so someone's got an interesting story to tell that will help other people, inspire other people. I'm always happy to have them on, and you being one of those people, John. So thank you for coming on the show today. Thank you for really everything that you shared. I think a lot of great takeaways that people can use and apply to their own lives, life and business. So yeah, thank you for being here, and truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and continued good success. And we'll when we wrap up, we'll make sure we got emails and all that stuff. We'd love to have you on our show as well, and kind of share our audiences. Okay, we got time for one more quick thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, here's something, folks, that you may not realize. Okay, and this is not political. Okay, I don't share my politics with people, but during the last election, Donald Trump got on over 100 podcasts. Kamala got on 4. Now, what's my point about that? Is generally people under 40 are not listening to CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. Okay, like my kids, they don't even watch TV. They get all their news from their phones. So podcasting is something that's going to become more and more relevant from the standpoint of people getting information from guys like Jason, guys like myself, other podcasters. So I think what we're doing is beyond all the obvious reasons to do it, to promote our businesses, ourselves, etc., is also the fact that people want to hear from real people. I don't want to hear that the sky's purple and I'm looking outside and I go, it's clearly blue, but some reporter's telling me, trying to convince me that it's purple, and I see it's blue. So I think what we're doing is it's got a lot of socially redeemable things to it, beyond the obvious. So keep listening to podcasters. Support your local podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, that is a great point. And, with that, I mean, folks listening, just make sure you connect with John, connect with him directly, check out his podcast, and please like, rate, and review the show so we can continue to get more great guests. And as always, thank you for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?